Trazyn the Infinite, the galaxy's most obsessive collector, the ASH KETCUM of Warhammer 40K, and the only being who has a Krork, a Primarch, and a Catan shard in his collection.
Behold, my stuff.
In today's video, we're going to break down who Trazyn is, his powers, his collections, his greatest feats, and finally, how he stacks up against the rest of the 40K universe. Will Trazyn prove himself a threat even to the likes of the Silent King? Make your bets, people. Make your bets. Let's jump straight into the power scaling hole. Say it with me, my beloved herd. It's time to power scale. According to The Infinite and the Divine, which is a fabulous book, before biotransference, Trazyn was a Necron tier scribe and chief archivist. After prematurely awakening from the Great Sleep, Trazyn set out to expand his collection, pledging he'd share it with the rest of the Necrons once they awoke. Trazyn's philosophy is simple: preserve the past at all costs. This naturally puts him at odds with Orkan the Diviner, who wants to change the past for a better future. Which of course is a huge plot point throughout The Infinite and the Divine, which is once again a fantastic read. 10 out of 10 milk jars, fellows. Would highly recommend reading this one. What makes Trazyn so unique though is that he's collected a plethora of technology and relics so rare they're practically priceless. Trazyn's collection hunting has led him into some wild encounters. He's tried to steal the Spear of Vulcan from Vulcan Histan, only to somehow be defeated both times. An anti-feat we will cover in a minute. He's traded and bargained with Chaos Aligned characters, battled during the 13th Black Crusade at Cadia, and even swapped places with a Necron overlord to claim their dynasty. So essentially, all you need to know is that Trazyn is the galaxy's ultimate hoarder, willing to fight, scheme, and manipulate anyone to preserve or expand his collection. Now you're probably asking yourself, how are we going to factor in Trazyn's collection when we're power scaling him? Well, in true artistic falling cow fashion, we won't be power scaling just one form of Trazyn, we're going to be power scaling two. Base form Trazyn, which is just him, with his unique weapons, powers, and abilities at full force. While his second form we'll be looking at is his full collection form, or as I like to call it, Trazyn the Great Collector, where he can unleash the full might of his collection. Sound good? Alright, let's get into it. First up is base form Trazyn. And of course, I think we need to start at the very beginning, which is what it means to be a Necron overlord and the insane abilities that come with it. All Necrons, including Trazyn, inhabit necrodermis bodies, living metal constructs that are far more than simple machines. These bodies can self-repair, reshape themselves, and absorb energy, making damage that would obliterate humans or even space marines little more than a nuisance. On top of that, reanimation protocols allow Necrons to literally rise from death. Shatter them, melt them, blow them apart, it doesn't matter. As long as their core systems survive, they can reassemble or teleport to a tomb world or ship to be repaired. Essentially, catastrophic damage is basically just a minor inconvenience to these skeleton boys. And according to The Infinite and the Divine, should Trazyn's body be destroyed, his consciousness is downloaded into a new body. Outside of being practically unkillable, Trazyn's physical abilities are quite similar to most Necron overlords. Across his appearances in Warhammer 40K, Trazyn has repeatedly tanked hits from orcs, space marines, and even Catan shards and kept fighting, his necrodermis shrugging off the punishment that would outright cripple most characters. His speed is also absurd, as seen in The Infinite and the Divine, when Trazyn moves so quickly that an Eldar aspect warrior appears to be stuck in slow motion, giving Trazyn microseconds to process battlefield data, make decisions, and act while his opponents are effectively frozen. His physical strength is no joke either. In one particular, blunt demonstration, Trazyn simply channels kinetic force into his fist and no-diffs a massive fucking dinosaur, driving a punch straight into its throat. The raptor went down with the noise of a bungle player experiencing sudden and unbearable agony. Between his durability, speed, and striking power, Trazyn's base physical abilities place him far beyond conventional combatants. And that's before you even factor in his technology or his collection. Like other Necron overlords, Trazyn can split his consciousness across multiple subminds to command entire armies simultaneously, slow his perception of time into microseconds, predict outcomes through advanced chronometric simulations, hack enemy systems faster than they can even register an intrusion, and move with a level of precision and efficiency that outclasses even enhanced transhumans. But even more insane is that it appears that Trazyn can operate outside the normal flow of time itself. Yes, he is also a dime wizard. He's shown the ability to slip into pocket dimensions and freeze moments in time using stasis fields.
It's time to stop!
It appears he can do this to just about anyone, as during the book Clone Lord, Trazyn was able to capture the perfect clone of Fulgrim using these stasis fields. The Primarch still had a puzzled expression on his face, like a child being reprimanded for something he did not understand. My thanks, Clone Lord. He is truly excellent, and will make a fine addition to my collection. Let that sink in for a second, Herd. Time stops and Trazyn casually walks away with the Primarch tier bean, like he just found a rare antique at a garage sale. Also, we get a quote from this book that paints Trazyn to be the next General Grievous.
Your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection.
Is Vulcan Heastan Obi-Wan Kenobi? Put your theories down in the comments. And as if that all wasn't enough, Mr. ASH KETCUM here is also completely immune to telepathic attacks, as shown in the book The Infinite and the Divine. I mean, are you surprised I'm using this book so gosh darn much? If you're gonna learn anything from this video, it's two things. Trazyn is actually pretty strong for a librarian, and The Infinite and the Divine is the best Necron book out there. And if you don't read it, I'm going to come to your house and milk you. You will read The Infinite and the Divine. You will read it. You will, you will, you will, you will, you will, you will, you will. Now that we've discussed how powerful Trazyn's body and abilities are, we can now move on to Trazyn's weapons. And we're starting with one of the most broken pieces of Necron tech in his arsenal. The Mind Shackle Scarabs. Mind Shackle Scarabs are one of the Necron's chief methods of controlling alien races. At the bearer's command, these microscopic scarabs burrow directly into the victim's mind, bypassing normal brain functions and reducing the target to little more than a puppet under the control of their master. According to the 8th edition Necron's Codex, Mind Shackles operate subtly. The host appears to retain their intelligence, personality, and even free will. It's only when the host resists that the Mind Shackles begin exerting overt control over the host. We actually see this play out very clearly in The Infinite and the Divine. I mean, are you surprised at this point? As Trazyn uses his Mind Shackle Scarabs to hijack a human body, and we're given a direct insight into how invasive this process really is. The Mind Shackle Scarabs. Trazyn took a different path. He opened his eyes. It was strange to have flesh and blood eyes again, stranger still to get them when a gene stealer was snapping at his throat. Trazyn shoved the Stormbolter under the Gene Stealer's chin and blasted its brains onto the ceiling. It was not just the eyes. There were thoughts, so many thoughts in Clara's mind. Chief among them was survive. No surprise there, but just below that was to kill the Necron. Interesting. What this shows us is that the host is still there. Their thoughts, instincts, and emotions are all intact. But Trazyn is riding shotgun in their brain. Just like that scene out of SpongeBob where Plankton is in SpongeBob's brain.
Now it's time for a little wakey-uppy.
God, sometimes I just surprise myself with how excellent my metaphors are. He can observe, override, and act whenever he chooses. Realistically, this shows that the mind shackles are fully capable of direct mind control when needed, but we just haven't seen the full extent of what they can dominate. For instance, we've never seen them used on Primarchs or Catan Shard, but there's no reason to think that he couldn't at least influence them. Beyond simple manipulation, the implantation of the mind shackles also prevents the host from harming Trazyn and can even kill them on his commands. And that is just one weapon. Jesus Christ. Next, Trazyn wields the Empathic Obliterator, which is a specialized Necron staff wielded exclusively by Trazyn the Infinite. Rumored to contain Old One technology, its origins are unclear and likely non-Necron, hinting at something far older and more dangerous than standard Necron weapons. When the Empathetic Obliterator slays a target, it releases a devastating psionic shockwave that ripples outward, killing nearby beings who share a similar mind, purpose, or psychic wavelength. This makes it especially lethal against unified forces like warbands or armies. The Empathetic Obliterator has been shown to be able to effortlessly kill orcs, Necron destroyers, and Lynchguard, and in the book The Infinite and the Divine, it is shown to be able to disintegrate Orican's head and melt the face of a Catan Shard. A ridiculous feat given that Catan are literal god fragments. The weapon also includes a built-in resurrection orb, allowing Trazyn to instantly trigger reanimation protocols mid-battle. On top of that, it has been shown capable of countering time manipulation, resisting or negating chronomancy, and other temporal distortions. The third and final piece of gear Trazyn wields is the Time Splitter Cloak, which is a garment woven from pure time and space, which Trazyn very politely borrowed from its previous owner. And when I mean borrowed, he straight up stole it. The cloak lets him peer into possible futures, analyze branching timelines, and select the outcome where he comes out on top. In combat, the cloak functions as a hard counter to both ambushes and chronomancy. It repeatedly warns Trazyn of incoming dangers before it occurs, allowing him to sidestep surprise attacks, evade gunfire, and predict the trajectories of entire volleys of destroyer weaponry. What? It even blocks Orican's own future sight, preventing another chronomancer from reading or interfering with Trazyn's chosen timeline. Aren't the Necrons so insane? They literally have a cloak that allows you to look into the future and decide which timeline you want to pursue. Goddamn, if these fellas wake up, the galaxy is truly doomed. Before we move on, there's one last pivotal factor in Powerscaling Trazyn, his intelligence. Trazyn can understand and operate almost any technology at a glance, no matter how advanced, alien, or arcane. There seems to be no device, machine, or construct that Trazyn can't comprehend and manipulate immediately. But Trazyn's big brains come with a downside, as it appears he is not the best in terms of dueling ability as seen in the 5th edition Necron Codex. It is therefore an ideal weapon for a being such as Trazyn, who disdains exhaustive physical combat and far prefers a single telling blow at the opportune moment. This excerpt is in regard to the Empathetic Obliterator, but it does show us something important. That Trazyn is not a brute force combatant. He would prefer to strike at the opportune moment when his enemies are weak or caught off guard, which implies that he may not be the greatest fighter in one-on-one combat. Still, I don't think that matters too much because of the insane technology Trazyn has at his disposal. Now let's talk about Trazyn's greatest feats across the setting. Specifically those achieved without relying on his collection of monsters or stored allies. Even on his own, the ASH KETCUM of Warhammer 40K has shown some truly insane capabilities. Trazyn has easily defeated Orcs and Lich Guard, the latter being the second highest Necron caste below Overlords. He's frozen Belisarius Call in a stasis field, one of the Imperium's most advanced characters, and even removed him from the timeline entirely. A similar tactic he used on Clonegrim, the perfect clone of Fulgrim. He's fought and defeated Orican the Diviner, an Overlord Necron and master of time manipulation. Trazyn has also captured Krorks, Proto-Eldar, and even Catan Shards. all of whom he subdued and captured with stasis fields, which technically means they can be counted amongst his feats, although Trazyn probably just snuck up on them and threw a Pokeball at them, rather than have defeated them in a straight-up fight. Finally, one of his most impressive feats is taking on multiple Catan shards in melee combat, as seen in, of course, the Infinite and the Divine.
First time.
This fight truly cements just how far base form Trazyn can be pushed before hitting a hard ceiling. Before their fight begins, Trazyn is easily defeating Lich Guard, as we see him parry a Warscythe blow, counter, and decapitate a corrupted Lich Guard in a single strike. He is also seen to be employing the Time Splinter Cloak repeatedly, which saves his life, explicitly choosing timelines where he isn't killed. Trusting the Time Splinter Cloak to choose a future where he was not bisected by a phased blade. Is this the most broken item in Warhammer 40K? If your answer was no, then I don't think you've seen the Time Turner from Harry Potter. However, the moment the Deceiver Shard enters the melee, the scale of the fight shifts dramatically. This is not a lone fragment either, nor even a pair of shards, but 5 shards fused together, a combination that massively amplifies its power. Before we continue, I do want to stress that the Deceiver, according to the 8th edition Necron Codex, is actually the weakest Catan, so keep that in mind as we continue into this fight. The Deceiver is described as violating the laws of physics, streaming like conducted energy one moment and solid as a statue the next. It effortlessly annihilates Necron warriors, phases through or ignores conventional attacks, as if they simply do not apply, and is easily the strongest being on the battlefield during that moment. Even so, Trazyn does not retreat. He challenges the shard directly and survives long enough to wound it, landing a perfectly timed obliterator strike that causes the shard to scream in agony and leak antimatter. That alone shows that his weaponry, or at least the empathetic obliterator, is capable of harming Catan shards. But the text is equally clear that Trazyn is overmatched. The Deceiver overwhelms him, rips out his jaw, crushes his chest, and physically tears out his central reactor, inflicting pain so extreme the narration emphasizes that it surpasses even mortal sensation. Trazyn only survives this by instantaneously transferring his consciousness into a surrogate body mid-death, and then counterattacking before the shard can register him as a threat. Their duel comes to an end when Trazyn abandons the idea of winning and activates his Tesseract Labyrinth, unleashing the ultimate Deus Ex Machina, the entire preserved history of the Serenade, which includes Necron Phalanxes, Exodite Eldar, an Orc Wag, an Imperial Guard Battalion, a Gene Stealer Cult, and even Primaris Ultramarines, all released at the same time. But I kid you not, it still wasn't enough. The Deceiver Shard continues fighting through this impossible coalition, showing just how powerful a Catan Shard really is. Even though he eventually loses, this is not an anti-feat for Trazyn, as battling a Catan Shard for as long as he did is quite the feat in terms of durability, skill, and strength. So, as you can see heard, this skeletal librarian isn't too shabby in combat. But there is one glaring contradiction that must be addressed before moving forward, which is Trazyn's repeated defeats at the hands of Vulcan Heastan, as recorded in the Space Marines 6th edition Codex. Not once, but twice, Trazyn is beaten by a Space Marine, an outcome that truly does not make any sense at all. Their first encounter occurs when Trazyn attempts to add the Spear of Vulcan to his collection, and is defeated in personal combat. The second is far more egregious. Trazyn fabricates the existence of another relic, luring Vulcan Heastan into a carefully prepared trap. Despite having superior numbers and deception, Heastan defeats Trazyn yet again, forcing a Necron withdrawal amid shattered constructs and ruined forces. Don't worry folks, I'm in the same boat as you. All of this is simply silly as hell on page. Trazyn is a character who has demonstrated the ability to freeze Primarchs in stasis and injure Catan shards. There is no coherent reason why Trazyn would fail to employ stasis, chronotech, or any other ability he possesses against a single Space Marine. The most realistic interpretation is that Vulcan's relics provide a hard counter to Necron technology, rendering much of Trazyn's arsenal ineffective. The second, equally plausible explanation is that Trazyn simply is not trying, treating the encounter as a curiosity or an experiment rather than a battle he intends to win, which is entirely in character for a being who views war as a historical theater. Regardless of which explanation one accepts, these encounters stand as clear outliers when compared to the rest of Trazyn's feats. As such, while these losses must be acknowledged, they can't reasonably define Trazyn's true power or be weighed equally against the rest of his demonstrated feats. So that's base form Trazyn. No exhibits open, no stasis vaults unlocked, just the Overlord himself and his personal war gear. But now it's time to look at Trazyn's second form, where history itself becomes a weapon. We're now going to look at Trazyn, the Great Collector. Across multiple sources like the Necron Codex 5th and 9th edition, War in the Museum, Clone Lord, and the Infinite and the Divine, Trazyn's collection is one of the most absurd stockpiles of power in all of Warhammer 40K. Every exhibit contains living, conscious beings and events frozen mid-action through advanced stasis and holographic transmutation. Entire moments in galactic history are preserved exactly as they were, populated by real warriors, monsters, and legends still alive, just paused. The explicitly named entries are already insane. A 12-foot tall Krork in advanced power armor, Hive Tyrants, Harlequins, Exodite Eldar warbands, Horus Heresy era Ultramarines, Lost 10th Regiments, Salamanders from the Colovian disaster, Primar's Lieutenant Marcus Castus, Blood Angels Terminator, Raffello, Death Guard Plague Champion, Rafelgus Gru, and even Adeptus Custodes. Trazyn also houses Clonegrim, the perfect clone of Fulgrim, along with Necron Overlord, Sevrak, a Destroyer Lord, a functioning webway portal, an antique dreadnought, Mechanicus Magos, and the Chalice of Anthropy. The collection isn't limited to individuals either. War exhibits include the Last High Council of Idari Craftworld, Massacres on Tragus, Catacombs of Kalth, Doom Rider's Folly, Death of Lord Solar Macarius, Sword Both Stolen and Sought, Imperial Heroes of the Tyrannic Wars, the Tyranid Invasion of Vuros, Istvan V, and several massive orc battles. His crown jewels include a shard of the Deceiver and a Catan shard he calls the Source, the centerpiece of his collection. That's only what's explicitly named. Realistically, there should be thousands more warriors, relics, proto-Eldar, space marines, and forbidden technology that lie within. It's even said to rival even the Eldari's fabled Black Library. What was less known was that it also contained one of the greatest document collections in the galaxy, a rival even to the Eldari's fabled Black Library. But the terrifying part isn't that he collects this, it's that he can deploy anything he has captured.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Trazyn's entire collection coming to get ya. By using Tesseract Labyrinths, Trazyn can summon warriors from any era, any faction, anywhere in the galaxy, effectively weaponizing the entire history of the galaxy at his will. This is because the museum, which is housed on the world of Solmonance, is anchored to a subdimensional reality bubble via reality tethers, meaning Trazyn could theoretically open this portal and bring forth any exhibit from his collection. And if that wasn't broken enough, Necron technology allows him to heal even the most lethal wounds and redeploy combatants indefinitely, according to Combat Arena Clash of Champions. This essentially means that Trazyn can keep sending out as many entities as possible because he can keep healing them. It's pretty much like bringing the Pokemon Center to the battlefield. Trazyn just heals them right up and sends them right back in. Holy cow, this guy's broken. In conclusion, Trazyn possesses a collection of some of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Through his pocket dimensions and reality warping arenas, he can summon them at will and theoretically heal them during combat, making his offensive and strategic potential virtually limitless. Now that we've covered both forms of Trazyn and the full scope of his capabilities, it's time to scale him against the rest of the 40K universe to see just where this Pokemon Master stands. Alright folks, it's everyone's favorite part of the video. As always, we're breaking this all down using a Gauss Power Pyramid with the same tiers as always. At the bottom, we've got Chapter Master tier. Here we find Space Marine Chapter Masters, Tau Commanders, Orc War Bosses, and all the elite, but still fundamentally mortal leaders who can dominate battlefields, but usually can't stand against beings coming next unless under specific circumstances. Above that is the Enhanced tier. This tier is reserved for characters who massively outperform standard elites. Characters like Grey Knights, Custodians, and most Demon Princes are in this tier. Wildly different power sets, but all operating well beyond normal limits without quite reaching godlike status. Next up is Low Primarch tier. In this tier, we have most Avatars of Cain, Greater Demons, and the weaker base, unaltered, undemonic Primarchs like Alfarius, Lorgar, and Gilliman. These characters can dominate battles and duel the strongest figures in Warhammer 40K, but they're not quite the apex of the setting. Then we hit High Primarch tier, the heavy hitters of the base Primarchs. Characters like Sanguinius, Horus, the Lion, and the other top tier base Primarchs who consistently outperform their brothers. After that comes Planetary tier, where characters start threatening entire worlds. This includes Catan Shards and Demon Primarchs. Above that is the Cosmic tier, reserved for entities that operate on a galactic or metaphysical scale. The Silent King and the Emperor and his 30k Prime sit in this tier. And finally, at the absolute dippity top of the setting is the Multiversal tier. This is the very top of everyone in the Warhammer 40k setting. This includes beings like the Emperor on the Golden Throne, Chaos-empowered God Emperor Horus Lubrical, the various gods of 40k, most of all the Chaos Gods, and the Folkatan like the Void Dragon or the Nightbringer. These entities can influence multiple dimensions and realities. Now that we've laid out the pyramid, it's time to do the even funner part. Is funner even a word? I don't think it is, but we're gonna make it a word here on A Felon Go. Because now we're going to walk through both versions of Trazyn the Infinite. Base Trazyn and Balls to the Walls Collector Trazyn, and see exactly where each one lands on the grand power scale of the 42nd millennium. Starting with base Trazyn, stripped of the full weaponized museum insanity, he's still an absurdly dangerous Necron overlord. His standard kit includes advanced Necron weaponry, Tesseract labyrinths, capable of trapping beings far beyond his weight class, space-time and reality-bending technology, and most importantly, his ability to transfer his consciousness into other Necron bodies. On top of that, Trazyn routinely demonstrates near-instantaneous comprehension of unfamiliar technology, tactical foresight bordering on precognition, and the ability to see and avoid future losses before they happen. He's essentially Hermione Granger from the Prisoner of Azkaban with no consequences. Now, it's important to be honest that Trazyn is not a master of personal combat, as stated explicitly in the 6th edition Necron Codex, and it does track with this character. Before biotransference, Trazyn was a librarian with delusions of grandeur, not a frontline warrior. So no, he is not out here throwing hands like a Primarch, and that's fine. His power has never been about physical domination. That said, even base Trazyn absolutely clears the Chapter Master tier. Those in this tier, like Chapter Masters, Tau Commanders, and Orc War Bosses, rely on conventional combat logic, strength, speed, tactics, and leadership. Trazyn, well, Trazyn ignores all of that. He can freeze enemies in stasis, trap them in pocket dimensions, outthink them before the fight even begins, and if somehow he is killed, he will simply continue the fight from another body. There is no realistic win condition for a chapter master against a being who can remove you from reality with a single device or avoid every lethal outcome before it occurs. Moving up, we have the enhanced tier, where things get a lot more interesting. Custodes and Grey Knights are monsters. In a straight up brawl, Trazyn could absolutely struggle. But the problem is, they still have to land a killing blow, and Trazyn's future sight makes that nearly impossible, due to the Time Splinter cloak. If a potential killing strike exists, Trazyn could simply avoid that timeline where it connects. That's not something skill or discipline can simply overcome. No Custodes or Grey Knight has shown the ability to bypass that level of foresight consistently, especially against a target who can disengage, teleport, trap, or body hop mid-fight. So while Trazyn may not dominate the enhanced tier opponents, he can outplay them. Between precognition and functional immortality, it's pretty safe to say base Trazyn sits above the enhanced tier. And then we arrive at the low Primarch tier, where, as always, things get really messy, as we have greater demons, avatars of Cain, and the weaker base Primarchs in this tier. Now, before we continue, when I say weaker base Primarchs, I don't really mean weak in the absolute sense, because even the lowest end Primarchs are still absurdly powerful. Primarchs are consistently shown to move faster than Custodes can even track, let alone react to. They're superhuman beyond most mortal comprehension, possess centuries of combat instinct, and can dismantle nearly any conventional enemy in the galaxy without effort. Even Primarchs like Alfarius, Omegon, Lorgar, or Guilliman would annihilate anything below this tier in a straight up fight. The same applies to named greater demons like Skarbrand or Kabanda. These entities regularly fight Primarch tier opponents toe to toe and can overwhelm anything beneath that level. They're able to destroy cities, distort reality by their presence alone, and can usually match some of the stronger foes in the setting. Then we have the Avatar of Cain, which is where things get a little annoying because yes, these fellas do lose quite a gosh darn bit. But on paper, they are still monsters. Avatars have traded blows with high tier Primarchs, like Fulgrim, inflicted Titan grade destruction, cleaving main battle tanks in half, and have even slain greater demons like the Keeper of Secrets or even Skarbrand. And in the book Valentor, a single Avatar of Cain fought an entire Tyranid invasion alone for days, piling up a literal mountain of corpses before finally falling. So despite their reputation as absolute jobbers, they are still an objectively low Primarch level entity. So how does Trazyn compare to these beefy boys? Well, first things first, Trazyn is not a great physical combatant. His most decisive wins, like trapping Clonegrim, rely on surprise and technology, not martial dominance. Clonegrim wasn't expecting a stasis capture and couldn't meaningfully defend against it. Realistically, against an aware Primarch, Greater Demon, or an Avatar of Cain, these stasis Pokeball tactics become far less reliable. Even in the Infinite and the Divine, Trazyn struggles to stand up to the Deceiver Shard he is fighting, and that matters because in the 8th edition Necron Codex, the Deceiver is explicitly stated to be the weakest Catan in raw power, even after consuming his fellow Catan. Yes, the shard Trazyn faced was composed of multiple shards, making it stronger than most, but the end result is still telling. Trazyn could only stall it, not defeat it. That same level of stalling is something a base Primarch, Avatar of Cain, or Greater Demon could reasonably replicate for a short amount of time. And if you want to argue that the Time Splinter Cloak would aid him in this fight, and put him over the low Primarch tier, I counter with the argument that the cloak didn't seem to really help him when the G'dan Shard was beating the shit out of him, showing that if an entity is fast or strong enough, the cloak becomes ineffective. So while Trazyn has the equipment and intellect to punch far above his weight, the feats just aren't there to place base Trazyn beyond this tier. At best, I think it's fair to say that base Trazyn sits at the upper end of the low Primarch tier. He can likely outplay Avatars of Cain and Greater Demons through superior technology and tactics, but he probably can't defeat the weaker base Primarchs like Lorgar, Guilliman, or Alfarius and Omegon. Trazyn is basically Batman without prep time, terrifying with gadgets, brains, and contingencies, but once the fight starts and the god tier fists are flying, he doesn't climb higher than this. But that is merely base Trazyn. Clever, slippery, and absurdly hard to kill. But now we remove those limits and look at Trazyn when he can release the full might of his full collection. And frankly, this form is almost impossible to quantify. As we discussed earlier, Trazyn's collection contains millions of unique beings, characters, and artifacts from across time. But the real question is, what tier does someone belong to when they can deploy Primarchs, Quarks, Eldar High Councils, Enslavers, and multiple Catan shards whenever they feel like it? Well folks, we're about to find out. It's time to power scale every single relative, character, force, or entity stored within Trazyn's library.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Beginning with the Eldar High Council of the Craft World, Idare. And right off the bat, Trazyn's collection is already pretty powerful. As one Necron Lord famously stated, that Mephiston, arguably the strongest living Loyalist Psyker, is only a shadow of what the ancient Eldar once were. Now of course, the Eldar can no longer return to that level because of Slaanesh, but even with a smidge of that power, they are still a force to be reckoned with. Take Eldrith Uthran for example, the strongest Farseer we know of. He has demonstrated feats that border on reality breaking. He can stop time in a localized area, invade minds across the galaxy, block plasma fire with psychic force while simultaneously conducting massive rituals, and even acting as a pseudo-astronomicon. Now the High Council of Craftworld Idare do not have Eldred, but these are still ancient Farseers and Exarchs, not random seers. Even if they're a step below Eldred, they're almost certainly operating in the low Primarch to high Primarch tier, especially when acting together. That means multiple high tier Psykers coordinating fate manipulation, precognition, and psychic annihilation at the same time is something most characters in 40k would struggle to counter. Next, Trazyn has an Enslaver, which possesses immense telepathic abilities, which allows it to enslave entire populations and force victims to do its bidding. On their own, they're already apocalyptic, but when empowered by multiple hosts, they escalate into something vastly worse. In Horus Heresy Book 8, Malevolence, a single enslaver entity, massively empowered, fought 3 Primarchs at once. Yes folks, you heard that right. The Primarchs were sorely tested, for while, such as they could, scarcely know fear, each soon bore a dozen and more hurts. Even the mighty Horus felt the behemoth's mental whip, and though he repelled its will, the effort left blood gushing from his eyes in crimson rivers. Mortarion too struggled against this vile foe, and while his scythe cut through its thrashing tentacles by the dozen, it strove to gain dominion over his mind and to become master of his flesh. As with Horus, the behemoth was unable to batter down Mortarion's defenses, but resisting it drove the Death Lord to his very knees. So as you can see here, a single enslaver, fully amped, was able to mentally cripple Horus and Mortarion, pushing multiple Primarchs to their limits all at the same time. At this level, this thing comfortably scales into the planetary tier, and the fact that Trazyn owns one at all is insane. Next down the list is the Custodian, one of the strongest mortal warriors in the setting. Custodians exist firmly in the enhanced tier, vastly superior to Space Marines, and capable of challenging far stronger foes than their size suggests. After them is a Quark, the original Orc. Larger, smarter, stronger, and engineered specifically to fight Necrons and Catan during the height of the War in Heaven. As established in a previous video, which is how powerful are the Quarks, the beast who fought Vulcan was close to Quark level, but not fully there. And that beast was able to physically overpower Vulcan, the strongest Primarch, as seen in the book The Beast Must Die. A true Quark would therefore be stronger than the beast, which places a genuine Quark solidly in the high Primarch tier. After that comes the Hive Tyrant, which according to the 5th edition Tyranids Codex, is the pure embodiment of the Hive Mind. They are towering monsters 3 times the height of man, and can tear through most mortal warriors in the galaxy. That said, they are also kind of bummy compared to everything else on this list, and so individually I have High Tyrants sitting in the enhanced tier. roughly comparable to Custodes.
Come on over here. Come on over here. No, you flipped me off. Come on, coward. No. Come on. You're not an intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.
After them is a troop of Harlequins. They trade durability for absurd speed and weapons that straight up ignore most armor in 40k, including Armite. Following them is the Necron Overlord, a hyper-intelligent overlord who enslaved a Catan shard to power his galleries before being captured by Trazyn. Then we have a Destroyer Lord, which is a Necron Lord driven by the Destroyer Curse, and as stated in The Infinite and the Divine, this particular Destroyer Lord was trying to scour an entire world. Both of these beings plausibly scale from low to high Primarch tier. And now we come to the perfect clone of Fulgrim, also known throughout the community as Clonegrim. He is not a flawed copy, but a fully realized Primarch clone with all the genetic and physical abilities that comes with that. This purple fella opens up a whole can of worms. How do you even scale a perfect Primarch clone? Does he cap at base Primarch? Does he scale exactly to Primarch pre-demonhood? Or does experience matter more than biology? Though his screen time in Fabius Bio Clone Lord is brief, Clonegrim very clearly demonstrates the physical supremacy inherent to Primarch biology. He cuts through warp beings and traitor space marines within Fabius Bio's laboratory, treating elite transhuman warriors as little more than obstacles. His speed is described as transonic, moving faster than sound and appearing as a blur even to the enhanced perceptions of Astartes. In terms of durability, he mirrors Fulgrim's original physiology, able to sustain wounds that would instantly kill any other biological creature and continues to fight without hesitation or fear. However, this does not automatically mean Clonegrim operates at Fulgrim's full combat ceiling. Clone Lord makes it clear that Clonegrim is mentally underdeveloped. He possesses the intellect and emotional maturity of a child, naive, trusting, and lacking any of the centuries of experience, genius, or martial discipline that made base Fulgrim truly lethal. He fights purely on instinct alone. But we do know from the book Talon of Horus that perfect Primarch clones can still reach their full potential. The cloned Horus Lubrical demonstrates unquestionable dominance, blitzing space marines and overpowering even elite psychers like Iskandar Kaon. That precedent confirms that perfect clones retain the full genetic and psychological potential of their originals. The difference is merely experience. As Clonegrim exists during Clone Lord, his effective combat scaling is best placed in either the enhanced or the low Primarch tier. He probably still vastly outclasses other Astartes, Custodes, and most mortal champions, but simply lacks the combat skill and experience needed to consistently contend with veteran Primarchs, greater demons, or avatars of Cain. However, if he were to gain the experience and skill base Primarch Fulgrim had, then I would say his ceiling is absolutely high Primarch tier, which means Trazyn possesses a dormant high Primarch tier entity frozen in stasis. Then we finally come to the creme de la creme, Trazyn's 2 motherfucking Catan shards. So now let's quickly discuss how powerful a Catan shard is. According to the 8th edition Necron Codex, not all Catan shards are equal in size or power. Some are little more than fractured scraps of energy, barely capable of holding themselves together. But at the opposite end of the spectrum lie the transcendent shards. Catan remnants of such immense scale and potency that even the most reckless Necron overlords hesitate before unleashing them. These entities are sometimes formed when multiple shards of the same Catan merge together, creating a being that is an echo of its former godlike self. Despite the reduced and fully fettered state, Catan shards remain beings of nearly unlimited power. They can unleash devastating energy blasts, dominate the minds of lesser beings, manipulate the flow of time, and banish enemies into alternate realities. Their abilities are constrained by only 2 factors: their imagination, which is vast, and the fragmented memories of the omnipotent star god they were once part of. And yes, their feats back this up. Here are just a few examples from several Necron codexes. A shard of the Void Dragon escapes from its imprisonment, laying waste to the Erotep dynasty in its mindless rage. Though only a faint shadow of a true Catan, the Void Dragon gorges itself on a dozen worlds before the Erotep Cryptex can finally force it back into its cage. And from the 5th edition Necron Codex, we see the natural world revolts at the Catan Shard's presence, the very ground writhing and shaking as the physical laws holding reality together are undone. And additionally, in that same codex we see the Catan's presence destabilizes gravitational force, disrupting engines, teleporters, and warp jumps. So as you can see, Catan Shards are not just powerful, they are reality destabilizing entities. While we don't know the true extent of these specific Catan Shards' power, we can assume that they have the potential to be planetary level Catan Shards. So to summarize, Trazyn's collection is incredibly powerful. He has entities like Clone Grim, the perfect clone of the Primarch Fulgrim, who probably scales anywhere from the enhanced to the low Primarch tier, with the potential to rise even higher. He has a Krork, which scales to high Primarch tier, a Custodes, which falls into the enhanced tier, a Destroyer Lord and a Necron Overlord, who are either low to high Primarch tier, an Enslaver, which is a planetary tier level entity, maybe even cosmic depending on scaling, a Hive Tyrant, which is an enhanced bum, a Harlequin Troop, which falls into the enhanced tier, an Eldar High Council, which scales to low to high Primarch tier collectively, and finally 2 Catan Shards, which are planetary tier. And that's before we even factor in thousands, possibly millions of Space Marines, Orcs, Eldar, and other legendary warriors spanning the Great Crusade, Horus Heresy, War in Heaven, and modern 40K, all frozen in stasis and ready to be unleashed. So, yeah, wow, that's a lot of damage. So where does the Great Collector form of Trazyn scale? With this great collection behind him, Trazyn unquestionably breaches into the cosmic tier. He sits comfortably above the high Primarch and planetary tiers, especially when allowed to deploy his collection freely. His strength doesn't come from his own personal power, but from his ability to say, "Go random bullshit," and unleash an army composed entirely of planet killers, Primarch level threats, and God shards. However, and this is important, Trazyn can't compete with true reality manipulators. Entities that can reshape causality, rewriting time, or exerting direct metaphysical dominance still sit above him. The Silent King, for instance, wields weapons that can one-shot Warlord Titans, and according to the 8th edition Necron Codex, has personally defeated a Catan. That's right, folks, a full-on Catan. If you guys haven't watched my How Powerful is the Silent King video, go give it some love. Likewise, the Emperor of Mankind in 30K operates on a fundamentally higher level. He manipulates time and space with ease and would almost certainly dismantle Trazyn's entire museum before the Necron could even finish monologuing. So Trazyn the Infinite, the Great Collector, scales to the low end of the cosmic tier, due to the insane arsenal he has at his disposal. Against anything below true cosmic reality warpers, Trazyn is lethal, but against those above him, he falls rather short, especially those found in the multiversal tier. But if you're not the Silent King, and if you're not the Emperor, and Trazyn opens that vault, you're getting buried under a museum exhibit made entirely of planet-ending horrors. Yeah, that's spooky. So to sum it all up, base Trazyn, relying on his own body, wits, and standard Necron tech, scales solidly at the low Primarch tier. And on the other hand, Great Collector Trazyn, wielding his full museum of horrors, which includes Krorks, Hive Tyrants, a perfect Primarch clone, Custodians, Harlequins, Eldar Farseers, and 2 full Catan Shards, easily reaches Cosmic tier. That's right, Cosmic tier. He may be at the low end and still can't hold a candle to the likes of the Silent King or the Emperor of Mankind in 30K, but the sheer power and flexibility of his arsenal makes this one of the most insane jumps I've ever covered in my life. And that, folks, is gonna do it for this installment of Powerscaling Peeps. A huge thanks to my Patreon and YouTube members. Dean Goldberry, Nathan, Omar, Lag, Musty Lawyer, Seth Capizilla, and Kadri. Your support makes these power scaling videos possible, and I appreciate every single last one of you. As always, my favorite herd, make sure you're eating enough grass, stay milked, and I'll see you in the next video.